very, defensive, and that kind of struck me as odd. So I've had Christian counselors before who've counseled me on this issue, but I've never had anyone really be really defensive about it.
So tell us about how the two of them would work together and, kind of oversee this program. I mean, and actually talk about these young boys, too.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher, I remember Ted telling me that, they were in the locker room with all these boys changing one day, and Christopher Beard kind of smiled at him. He's like, oh, my God, I have the best job ever. As they're overlooking all these, innocent 18, 19-year-old boys. And it was just, they would talk, sexually about these guys. And I guess one other incident that happened with them was that the day before an executive meeting with Ted Haggard, he would always, invite me to all these meetings with him and all his staff. And he takes me to his office. He's like, Grant, I want to show you something. And he's got this big old grin on his face, and he pulls his book off his shelf. And inside this book is a photo of pretty much all these 24/7 guys in his office, completely naked, holding, different books over their crotches or, different items in his office. And he's just like, oh, wow, I love this. He's like, I got to go show it to the other staff people. They're all going to laugh. And then he found out, I guess, Gail was attending the meeting, his wife. And then he was like, oh, well, I better not. Gail's here. And he had me go back to his office and put it back in the book.
So was there sexual activity going on with these young men, or did you know anything about it? Did you, hear any of those stories?
I really don't know. I don't know if there had been sexual activity, and I'm not really sure about why Christopher Beard, the exact circumstances that he had to leave his position at New Life. But I know that I'm the one who got him in trouble, because once all this came out, actually in December, a week before he resigned, it was the first time I met with church leadership and showed him all my text messages from Ted. And inside those text messages were incriminating. They were incriminating towards him. So that kind of launched their investigation into him, and then he ended up resigning.
He also showed you a website called squirt.org.
Yeah.
And where it was like a hookup site of some sort. And he told you that once there was a posting on there about all of the 24/7 guys going every morning to work out at the 24-hour fitness gym, basically telling people to go there and check them out.
Yeah, he just thought, he was telling me about the hookup site, the tour.org site, I guess. And I guess on there they have listings of gyms to go to, I guess, meet guys or whatever. And I guess he told me, there was a post on there about, come here every morning between this time and this time. There'll be a bunch of, naked 18-year-old boys in the shower that you can watch. I mean,
now, your friend Will was eventually in that program, the 24/7 program, and he talked about the program. He talked about what the program was like and what it was like going through it. Talk a little bit about that, because he talked about the intensity of it and what they did.
Yeah, it definitely was an intense program. It was hard for him. I think, they would make him, everything was they'd say it was for a training exercise, whether they're making the kids run till they throw up, whether they're here, we're going to give you a bag of something, you have to eat it no matter what's in it. All these little, military-type training exercises. He would tell me, the thing that was most annoying for me was that this Christopher Beard guy kept telling him, don't walk like that, walk like this. Don't talk like that, talk like this. They wanted to make him physically appear not gay.
And Christopher Beard described himself as struggling with homosexuality as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he would teach him how to walk, and he also said that people who are struggling with homosexuality should be naked in front of other men as much as possible.
Correct. He told me that I mean, I think he told me that when I was in counseling with him. He's like, the reason why we have them naked is that they get used to looking at other males' bodies so they don't feel so uncomfortable, so they don't have anything. They see there's nothing to desire by looking at all these other men. Like, they're the same as you.
And Will also told you about some of this intensity of the training where they would wake people up in the middle of the night in this program, the 24/7 program, these young men, and put a hood over their heads and take them out into the woods and tie them to a tree?
Yeah, they wanted to simulate being kidnapped, like, while on a mission trip, and really prepare them for anything that could happen. Because I know some of the mission trips they did were kind of like, in China or in countries that aren't really friendly towards Christians.
Right. You talked about how they were simulating terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
And simulating Christians coming under attack by terrorists.
Yeah. It was like this whole thing. They even put on, like, where church members could volunteer and church staff would volunteer, and they would replicate, Baghdad or something like that, somewhere in the Middle East. And church members would dress up like merchants, and they would pretty much train the kids how to react in all kinds of different situations they might encounter while in these countries that aren't really friendly to Christians. And
they even had run-ins with the police doing some of this.
Yeah, there was an incident a while back where the police were actually called. Someone called 911 because there was a whole bunch of people dressed up in on a prairie or whatever, and in masks, and had guns and stuff, and they were kind of trying to simulate terrorist attack, like you were saying earlier.
I want to talk more about your relationship then with Ted Haggard through that time and what happened, and of course then about the sexual interactions and some of what he was telling you, and certainly you talk about much more than Ted Haggard has, rampant drug use by Ted Haggard, and what he called the formula, a sort of drug mixture for sex that he would put together, the party formula, he called it. I want to talk about that and get into some other issues. Also, a lot of this pornography that, gay porn that he was watching and kind of struggling with too, and giving to you and then taking back. We'll get into all of that. And of course, a whole bunch of these other issues as well. Grant Haas is my guest, a young man who came forward last week and talked about Ted Haggard and, of course, his involvement with Ted Haggard, more allegations against Ted Haggard in the week that Ted Haggard, of course, was trying to rehabilitate his reputation on Larry King, on Oprah. I'm Michelangelo Signorile. We will continue on OutQ, Sirius 109 XM 98. I am speaking with Grant Haas, 25-year-old man who came forward last week and talked about his experience over the past several years with Ted Haggard, of course, the former pastor at the New Life Church, and a man who was brought down in the scandal when Mike Jones, the former escort, went public about his relationship, his business relationship with Ted Haggard. Ted Haggard was a client of his. Grant Haas last week came forward and talked about a sexual interaction with Ted Haggard, and then his having gone to the church about it, because he was really and his story about how over a period of months this really emotionally affected him is something we're going to talk about. He needed help. He needed counseling. The church then covered up everything that happened. Grant, I want to talk a bit about the way that Ted Haggard began to talk to you about sex and about his own sexual desires, and then he would go into a total sort of repenting mode and kind of say he was sorry and say that it was wrong and he was trying to get this out of him. Talk about that first time he began to talk to you about sex and send you these text messages about sex.
Yeah, the first time it became sexual was in January of 2006. And I just started getting these text messages from him.